Okay, and then should we get started?
Sure.
Cool. Dawn, is that good with you? Cool. Well, we'll say we're starting now. I am super excited this Tarot Tuesday to have Nicole, the creator of the Printers Tarot, here with us today. I'd love to talk about everything with you, Nicole. I could talk about like every card with you, I feel like, in this deck, but I will try to not do that and ask you a little more general questions and then a few really specific card questions. But before we get into the deck, I'd love for you to tell folks, unlike me, who are not super letterpress printing and the kind of design work that you do, kind of a little bit about your background with these anti-capitalist love notes and just printing presses in general and typesetting and how you love Garamond.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to go over that. Hi, folks. It's really nice to see you, and thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I am deeply a typography nerd and also deeply witchy. And tarot is like part of like one of the tools that I have used for a really long time in life. For like comfort and also clarity. And so it's really nice to get to talk about it with you all. Just a quick, before I go further, how's the sound and video and stuff for people? Is it okay?
It's looking great.
Okay, great. So yeah, my name's Nicole Manganelli. I live in Portland, Maine, and I am a printmaker and also a graphic designer. So I had a whole long life doing nonprofit work before I went freelance in 2018 to start doing really focusing on my printmaking work and start doing graphic design as my full-time job. And knock on wood, it's working so far. So that's kind of amazing, especially considering the horrible year that this has been. So yeah, I came to letterpress printing in 2012, which is usually hand setting wood and metal type in printing presses and sort of doing very slow graphic design by, really focusing on each letter and each word and how it's positioned on the page and putting a lot of time and intention into that. So that I came to that through a love of poetry and like the intention behind each word, and each line in a poem. And yeah, I quickly became a typography nerd, and then decided to give myself this project, of designing the Printers Tarot. So I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more. And also stop me if I get long-winded.
Oh, you're great. This is fabulous.
Okay, cool. So yeah, that is a little bit about my background. I've also done other kinds of printmaking work. I've started getting into risography, which is sort of a combination between screen printing and photocopying. It's like a weird, obsolete Japanese photocopier, basically, that uses individual drums for individual colors. So you have to like swap them out and you print color by color, like screen printing.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. I've been watching some Japanese sword making videos, and this reminds me of that, the like antiquated techniques, the very slow process.
Totally.
Swords and words, you know?
Yep, that's true.
So I would love to know, what was your first tarot deck or some really influential tarot decks for what you looked at as your sources for creating your own tarot deck and what you've used in your own personal life as a witchy person?
Yeah. So my first tarot deck was a universal weight deck, which I got when I was, I think, 16 or 17, that I still have, which is fun. It's been through a lot. Um, so that was my first one. I got that because I liked that the colors were a little bit more muted than the Rider-Waite deck.
Mhm.
It just sort of spoke to me in a different way than the Rider-Waite deck did. And then I actually I got the mini Mother Piece tarot, probably like 10 or 15 years ago, that are the circular cards. I don't know if you've ever seen those.
I have. They're very unique.
Yeah. I got those and I actually threw away the book of interpretations that they came with and sat and did a meditation with each card and wrote my own like interpretations of each card. And that is actually
Mhm.
what I used as the basis for the interpretations for the printer's tarot.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
and
awesome.
then the other deck that I use a lot right now is the Wild Unknown.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
It's so pretty. And I feel so drawn to the art, all puns intended, I guess, because it's all like pen and ink with watercolor. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, and I just really I I generally feel like the interpretations that Kim Krans has written resonate with me. Some of them are pretty intense and pretty dark, but sometimes life is like that. So,
Yeah. Um, I see a lot of comparisons. I'll show one to get a little bit into more specific influences that I am inferring, and I would love to know if I'm right. This is the Visconti, a reproduction of the Visconti tarot, and the setup of like how the cups are arranged.
oh,
And
yeah.
yours reminds me of this one rather than the French Marseille, which I have the mini version of, where the singular cup is in the middle rather than at the top. And
Whoa.
I wondered if you used any decks that had pips that were more unillustrated or more playing card like, because of the limitations of typography and using only letter forms to create the deck.
Um, I I actually didn't. I wish that I had been as thoughtful as that to be sort of referential in that way. But this was really uh, it was just kind of what came out of my brain. And archetypes are in there. I'm sure that I had seen those cards are familiar to me, and
Okay.
those illustrations are familiar. But I really just kind of like sat with each one and like played with the shapes and with any ideas that came up and with the actual letters until each card was kind of born. So it actually, so the major arcana, I had the idea to do this deck, and probably like a couple of months after I had the idea, I sat down one day and designed almost every single major arcana card in the span of like, it was like a 4 or 5 hour, like just flood. Like they just all came through all at once. It was wild. And a lot of them,
Wow.
yeah. And that's when I was like, okay, probably I should finish this project.
Yeah,
um,
that's incredible. I'm comparing this in my own mind because I did the 22 major arcana in sonnet form, unrhymed sonnets, and it took me like years. Just the majors, like I haven't even like gotten into the minors to that. And then they're my cards because I am not a visual artist. I really want to know, did you use like the letter forms or typography stuff that you would use in a letterpress to play with rotating letters, or did you use like an InDesign kind of program, or both?
I used InDesign. Yeah, so I did it all digitally, but I knew enough about manipulating type that I was really like I really wanted it to be, I didn't like stretch or distort any of the letter forms. Like I would shrink or expand them. But everything, like theoretically, each of these cards could be typeset. It would take layers and layers and layers of printing in order to get the layers of like letters in order to get the details that I like put into each of them. But when I designed them, it was really important to me not to like stretch or distort any of the type. Because I, it's like, the like graphic design and typography, like sin of the world is to like stretch a font or like stretch an individual letter and distort it from what the person who created it meant for it to look like. So,
and I'm envisioning in my mind, and let me know if this is correct. If you were to do them on a letterpress, the cards, they would be like other letterpress material, like the layers that you're talking about, regions. I think I cut out there, but I was asking, would you feel indentations in the cards if you were to have printed them in the way that you're talking? That's what the layers you're talking about mean?
Yes. So you can only set sort of one layer at a time. And so I would need to, I'm trying to think if there's like an easy, where there are cards that have a tremendous amount of overlap, like this card, I would do the outside circle of Y's and D's first, and then I would print over them the inside circle of Y's and D's, because you can't sort of overlap like that in one like lockup in the press. And yes, they would be, we call that debossing, the process of actually like compressing the paper so that it creates a like three-dimensional feeling. It's that thing that we all love about letterpress printing, right? Which is that like when you do it on cushy paper, it leaves an impression, literally and figuratively. Oh,
I think that's very much. I really, okay. If I caught up audio wise, I think I was cutting out a little bit. Am I good now?
You're caught up
Okay.
now. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, I was saying how I really love the connections between letterpress printing and the tactile nature of the cards. If I were to get like my sonnets printed on cards, I would want them shuffleable. They're the first. I've written several sonnet sequences before, and the ability to move things around and a randomness is what kind of attracts me to magic. The like meaning in randomness. And I would love to hear kind of your witchy thoughts on this or other magical aspects that went into your tarot deck and your own practice with tarot.
Yeah. I wanted the cards to feel really like comfortable in the hand. I wanted them to feel accessible. And I wanted them to feel as representative as possible. So I actually, other than the skull on the death card, there's no human representation in here. It's all sort of images or animals or like archetypes or patterns or that kind of thing, because I really wanted people to be able to see, to not get tripped up by the kind of like often white Eurocentric, like one body type kind of imagery that shows up in a lot of mainstream tarot decks.
Yeah.
Even though that is changing, like thank goodness for indie tarot, there are like so many beautiful cards now.
Showing a little example here of the white heterosexual card versus like your interpretation of the same card. This is what she's talking about, folks. It's so good.
Yay, thank you. Oh, that's so fun to see that reflected back to me, because that was definitely the intention.
Yeah, and I love that it's letter forms instead of animals, because I feel like animals are beautiful, wonderful, but they've really been done a lot. And this is so, I collect tarot decks, and so when I come across one that's so unique like yours, I get really, really excited because it's so different. So yes, I love that. I'll show another comparison I wanted to talk about. I wanted to hear just again on the individual card level. This is a Visconti suit or a court card, and you changed some of the court names. Here we have, this is a king and this is a master, and you have apprentice. These kind of, and I would love to hear about the transitions in relations of power, as well as what we were talking about with race and queerness.
Yeah. And I actually, as I have continued to think through the ways that I named the cards, I might do it differently if I was going to do it again.
Okay.
But I think so. I named the court cards the novice, the apprentice, the journeyman, and the master, because that is the sort of trajectory of a letterpress printer as you are learning the craft of letterpress printing. And it's journeyman is like also used in a lot of other trades, I think. And like electricians and stuff use it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would even say like tattoo artists or other, carpenters maybe.
Oh, cool. I didn't actually know that. But I do think that there's some embedded like sexist language in using journeyman. And like I considered doing journey person, but like thought through and was like the word journeyman is like the word that connotes the thing that I'm trying to connote. And so I was like sort of arrived at a like language is complicated, I'm going to use it kind of place. And same with the master, I think that there are a lot of like complicated and some like horrifying associations with the idea of a master and what it means to be a master in history, like throughout history. But there's also the use of that language that simply means the mastery of a skill, which is the way that I used it here. And the term master printer is still really commonly used in letterpress printing circles and means a very specific thing, that you have like gone through an apprenticeship with another master printer in order to become sort of certified as a master printer. And those cards, actually, the Master of Swords and the other masters, I wanted to make those cards that would be incredibly difficult to typeset. And so that is why some of it is backwards. And like it's setting type in circles is like actually kind of hard and on curves. And so I wanted those to like sort of stand out as being a little bit like different design wise from some of the other cards.
Yeah, I'm super excited about connecting, because this is the visual element of the letters with kind of word choice intention that goes into creating metaphors for a poem. So if you're using an extended metaphor like the printing press in a poem, you'll come across this same language, and you come across, I think, the same gendered concerns, power concerns, and how we're kind of bound in this like Judith Butler fallow logo centric language that we all kind of exist in. And that's really beautiful, because I think there's so much connection between poetry specifically and visual art because of the white space and the painting, like you said earlier. I have another card specific. I feel that the chariot is so much witchier in yours than some of the more traditional. I read Gertrude Moakley's book on how she thinks Petrarch's Triumphs poem is what the manuscript illustrations for that were specifically some of the inspiration for the Visconti Tarot. And it kind of falls apart, but this is the one card it works for because all of the images in Petrarch's manuscript that are illustrated are the triumphs. They're all in little coaches or carts. And you've taken out the card of the Roman processional and made it a broomstick, which I love. It's so witchy. So I would love to hear a little more about your the broomsticky or the broomstick witchery, I suppose. Are you kind of like a what traditions or practices have you, or books or authors or folks are you interested in like the witchy tradition?
I did a fairy witchcraft training probably like 15 years ago now. For I think 3 years I was in it. And it is sort of it was Black Heart Fairy. It was in sort of the tradition that comes through the Third Road and Francesca de Grandis, and then also Victor and Cora Anderson, and like the fairy tradition through those lines. And so that's where I am sort of most grounded in my witchiness. I did not actually become an initiate. I sort of had some life stuff happen and kind of wandered away from the training, but it's something that I have carried with me since then, and is still something that is deeply important to me. And like many blessings to my teachers along the way, I'm really grateful for the learning that I got to do alongside them. And just the like self-development that I got to do in that process. So that is some of where I kind of come from and like orient from as a witch. And then I also am very much a kitchen witch.
Nice.
Yeah, I have like, I would say, a pretty well-developed intuition. I'm also deeply a Pisces, and as a like water sign, who like really identifies with that, and that like really I am very Piscean, I think, in my like way in the world. I like really try to focus on what it feels like needs to happen in a given moment, whether that is like tending an altar or, you know, cleaning my threshold, or for protection, or like just sort of using the things that I have around the house in order to create magic. I really believe tremendously that there is such magic in the mundane, and there is such magic in having a practice that is something that you come back to over and over again. I think there's something very special that happens when you return to something over and over again.
I absolutely agree, and I think the simplicity of some of the images, I would never call your deck mundane, but I would definitely say that it draws upon, you know, using familiar images like the broom rather than like, I mean, this is obviously like a reproduction of a very special like gold-plated deck, but like the idea even behind the imagery rather than an epic processional, I feel is very home kitchen witchy vibe to your deck, and I really love that it's that. And also space.
I just lost you for. Sorry, I just lost you for a second.
I lost you. Sean, who is also a Pisces, by the way, is yelling from the other room every time that I lag. We have a couple questions from folks I would love to relay along. I have a million more. I could have you here all day.
Yeah,
I would
totally.
love to get you some. This is from Kim. Kim asks, which was the first card you designed in the Printer's Tarot, the very first of the majors?
That is a very special story, and such a good question. Thank you. The first one that I designed was actually the Fool. So it was the image that I chose to use for the card back, which is a slightly different version of the Fool that's on the front. But in any case, I designed the Fool first, and it was the sort of like creating that card was the thing that kind of broke open the whole project for me.
Oh, wow.
It also, I didn't realize this actually until after I had created the entire deck and launched it into the world, and it was like out in people's hands and they were using it. Someone said to me, like asked me about the dandelion, and I realized that so my mom passed away in 2016.
Oh, I'm so
Um,
sorry.
Thank you. And I wrote a series of poems during the time. It was pretty quick. She was diagnosed with cancer and died 4 weeks later.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, so it was like a very intense experience for all of us, and also meant that like we got some really beautiful time with her in hospice like before she passed, and so I feel very grateful for that. But I wrote a series of poems called Irish Daisies during and after the her passing, and Irish daisy is another name for dandelion. And the first poem in the series that I wrote was the title poem Irish Daisies, and was about that heartbreak is sort of as common as the dandelion, and that its seeds spread and settle in this way that heartbreak is just kind of everywhere and is a part of like how all of us, and grief is a part of how all of us learn how to function in the world with our own particular like pieces of grief and experiences of grief. And so I didn't realize actually until after I had made the whole deck that this was in part an homage to my mom. So that was the first card that I created, and that is the story behind it. So it was sort of magical to realize that I had written those poems before I did this deck, but I didn't make the connection until probably a year and a half later.
Pretty choked up right now. My dad passed from cancer earlier this year in May.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
And before that had happened, I had, years before that had happened, he had been struggling with cancer and he had gone into remission and come back several times. And during the time he had open heart surgery for the heart cancer that he had, I wrote the Emperor poem because I had been struggling with the Emperor poem because of all the connotations of the patriarchy and the power structures. And I felt, but he's an Aries, and Emperor is the Aries card. And I found that I wrote that poem and a long time before he passed, but it was so relevant afterwards. And to hear that your art is kind of coming from the same place is really beautiful to me right now. Yeah. I'm going to take another question from Dee while I'm a little choked up.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that.
No, it's amazing that art and grief are so intertwined, and how we use art for grief, I think, is super important to talk about. Dee asks, did anything about making the deck surprise or challenge you in translating from digital designs to the printing of the cards?
Oh, so here is the part that, and I probably should have said this at the beginning, that the cards themselves, like this set of cards is not letterpress printed.
Mhm.
So these were designed digitally and they are printed by a union print shop in Portland, because if I had hand typeset each one of these cards, I would still be working on them like 3 or 4 years later. I desperately wanted to be able to do some part of this as a letterpress project, but I just
Mhm.
couldn't. I also wanted them to be usable, and if I like letterpress printed them, they become things that like are precious in this way that it makes it hard to like have the kind of familiarity with a deck that you would need to in order to really use it. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I had similar thoughts about. I got a very very rare deck in like a reverse auction, and it's an Italian deck, and it's only the majors, and it's a modern Arthurian deck called the Court of Merlin.
Mhm.
Um, and it's just beautiful. But what I ended up because I didn't want to use them, and I was so afraid of using them that Sean actually got sleeves like you use for Magic cards, like Magic the Gathering cards. And so if you ever got funding and time, and if there were worlds enough and time, as Andrew Marvel would say, like, and you were able to letterpress these, I think that folks like I would, and Sean and folks would find a way to sleeve them in plastic coatings so we could shuffle them and use them. They would be just beautiful to take out and touch the letterpress.
There's also, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
There's also a process called photopolymer plate making, which allows you to create they're plastic plates that you can use in a printing press from any digital file. So that's like how a lot of like letterpress printed wedding invitations are done, so that like people can be like meticulous and like very specific about like every font that they use and like all of their sort of design choices on something, without like being reliant simply on whatever your print shop has in its collection. And so I actually did make a photopolymer plate of the strength card, which is like a bridge. And I made a bunch of letterpress prints just of the strength card. Yeah, I'm wondering if it's, of course, like every time I go looking for a specific card, I can like never pull it out. Oh, look at that. Look at you, magic.
I got you. I do this with books too. If someone wants me to find a quote in a book, I'm good like that.
Amazing. That's a kind of magic in and of itself.
Yes, this is amazing, and I think having as many of these in like big art prints. The Shadowscapes tarot deck. Have you seen that
I haven't.
one at all? It's Stephanie Law, who is actually from Oakland, is a woman of color, and it's a lot of Chinese mythology mixed in with traditional fairy tales. I only have the digital version of the deck, but I have her big coffee table art book. And I would encourage you to do such a thing of, like she does, of make a coffee table with big prints of these, like at least like regular big art size. And then like she wrote little conversations, even early drafts of things that she discarded. And I think that would be the most amazing project if you ever wanted to tell us more in a big art book about and do the big art pieces in it too.
That's very exciting. I actually toyed with the idea of doing broadsides, so doing like large letterpress printed posters of some of the individual cards, like getting plates made, but getting them made like large format. I think we can print up to like 12 by 16 or like 13 by 19 in our print shop on the Vandercook printing press that we have. And that or an art book could be really, really fun. And I have thought about
Yeah.
getting, like, if I could get plates made in batches to be able to print large format and then just cut down, like, that would be far fewer plates than getting like individual plates made of all 78 cards. So yeah, I'll keep thinking about it.
Awesome. Because I'm thinking about, like, I've seen even research, big academic books that have the kind of section of plates in it that are way different than the rest of the text. And that could be just gorgeous for yours. So, because I would love to have it in a book form. That would be so cool.
Nice.
A little selfish, but if you, I know you'd have buyers. People would definitely would love to purchase those and support you.
Good to know.
I have another question from Dee. Dee says,
Yeah.
I see a lot of interesting play with symmetry in the cards that is super cool. Could you speak to why it was used in some places and eschewed in others?
Ah, such good questions. My goodness. I really, you know, I wanted to balance, haha, um, like things that would look like very like clean and uniform if they were typeset, with stuff that would be a little bit more kind of non-traditional if it was typeset. And I also did just a lot of listening to like the story that each card wanted to tell, and a lot of playing around with like, are these the letters that I even want to use for this individual image? Like, because that was a whole thing. I could have an idea of an image, but I had to have letters in Garamond that would actually build what I was thinking about building. And in some cases, I like building a house. In some cases, in some cases, it just all kind of came together very quickly. And in other cases, I really sort of struggled. I mean, I had that amazing moment of flow with the major arcana, but then the minors took me the rest, like basically the rest of a whole year to complete. And that was with working on it like a lot. It was it was my thing that I was doing in my downtime all the time for about a year.
Wow, I'm still impressed. It still took me more than a year for the poems version. And I didn't even stick to rhyme. I stuck to my pentameter line and my 14 lines, but that was it. I have some questions from Sean. Hold on one second. Let me pull this up. I just saw.
Also, I just want to say, way to use eschew in a question. That was really well done.
Yes, D. Thank you, D. Mm-hmm. Sean would like to know why you didn't make the card backs reversible with that. You talked about the image of the fool that's on there, and I wondered if is there even a way that image could have been reversed so it appeared on both the top and the bottom?
Meaning?
So when you play
that,
if you use reversals, ooh, yeah.
I was so obsessed with the image of the fool that I was just like, this is just what the card back is. And that was just kind of it. I didn't, now the story behind the fool, but I was so the tarot bags that I got, that I screen printed to hold the carrying bags to hold them, which I screen printed the first few rounds of them. And then my friend Hope Ravelto owns a screen printing business in town, and she has done the rest of them for me. Turns out I'm a letterpress printer and not a screen printer so much. But I printed them on the bags. I got tarot cloths made that were printed with the fool. I sort of had this obsession with like needing to have that image on all of the things and like as the sort of main, like, I hate this word, but like branding, if you will, of like the whole deck. Um, yeah,
Are you a reversals kind of girl? Do you use reversals a lot when you read tarot or
I
not?
don't. So that's
Because the
probably,
mother piece is like the round. I'm thinking about that now. This makes complete sense. If you're a very big fan of those round, there's no up or down with that. It's a circle. Yeah, that's super interesting.
been using the universal weight and the wild unknown. I've never really read reversals. Like it's just not, I will take note if, you know, if an entire reading is reversed, I'll be like, huh, like how does that impact what I am thinking about what this is telling me? Or if only one like significant card is reversed, I might like also factor that in, but I don't explicitly read reversals. So I think that that's the other half of the answer, is that it's just not really a part of my practice.
And I think that's super personal. I would say among the people who I've talked to that read tarot, it's kind of almost a 50-50 split of people love reversals or don't. And some decks I think are not made for reversals, that the little white books don't include meanings for reversals. The artists have explicitly said this is a right side up, because even like in the card back, this would tell me like this is not much of a reversal deck. You're going to be able to tell from blues the randomness that I was talking about before. We have a couple more questions from folks. Let's see here.
Great.
Sean says, which major arcana would you yeet or get rid of from all decks if you could? And which arcana would you add? In the majors speaking.
Ooh. I might, well, I was going to say I might get rid of the devil, but I do think it serves a purpose. Like it, yeah, that was sort of, that design was such an encapsulation for me of like what the this sort of labyrinth that the devil card can be, this like feeling kind of trapped or feeling like I can't find my way out in order to like find my way toward the next thing that is the next right thing for me. um, and so yeah, I mean, I don't like the way the devil card is represented in a lot of like the universal weight deck. I'm like not jazzed about the devil card there. And so if I could pluck it out of some decks but not others,
Yeah.
maybe I would do that. And then what is there one that I would add? Is that the other part of the question? Um, gosh, that's such a good question. I don't actually know the answer to that. I feel like there's so much that's already represented in the majors. Um, I think I used the ocean to represent the high priestess in mine. I might use the ocean as sort of a like entity in other decks because I feel like that sort of like massive saltwater energy is like such a big part of being a human on planet Earth. And I also like live in a coastal city and have like been near the Atlantic my entire life. And I'm a water sign, even though I'm much more of a freshwater kid than a saltwater kid. Um, but it was really important to me that the ocean was represented somewhere in the deck. And it literally, like within the first few cards, like boom, there it was. It was the high priestess.
That's Such a Pisces answer from such a Pisces question asker, questionnaire, querent in tarot terminology from a Pisces querent. I love that too. Another deck I don't know if you've seen, which is kind of obscure, that I didn't bring in the room with me, and it's technically in a box underneath everything that I would just ruin if I just like lifted it. But it's something called the Orbifold Tarot, and instead of the suits as in cups or swords, he used the elements, and of course the cup suit was the water suit, and it's all a sacred geometry deck. It's all different digital manipulations of orbs that are layered and moved around to make different shapes, but it's all out of orbs. It's really beautiful.
Cool.
I wish I had said it out. I didn't think we would go this way with the direction of the conversation. I'm like, I'll pick out some Wade Smith and some Visconti. I'm all good. Let's see here. We have, this is a great question from Kim. Kim asks, these cards strike a lot of similar notes with sigil design in terms of combining letter forms and magical intent. Is sigil work something you're interested in as well?
I am now. I didn't actually know about it before creating this, if you can believe that, because now that I've seen it, I was like, what? Yeah, it's like something that I'm just starting to sort of dip a toe into and like be interested in. I find it also really sort of kitchen witchy because so many of the designs are like things that you could like scrape into a rock or like, draw on the beach. Like it feels like such a like simple but like very powerful way to use magic and to use like symbols, like simple symbols, in order to like hold a lot of power. Yeah.
Yeah, it especially, I'm very interested in the handwritten aspect of sigils versus working with letter forms and how you, for me, and I would love to hear if you feel the same way, of the bridge between, like, especially poetry. I always handwrite my poetry out first. But like between that and sitting down on the computer and like InDesign or in WordPress or any sort of word processing program, the tactile nature of the letterpress and the tactile nature of like the book and even just the type of like when you're letterpress. I don't know how many people have seen presses. I've been lucky enough to see them and like hold type, and it's so cool. Do you feel that for you as a tactile person who touches things, that letterpress is kind of that bridge between a handwritten text and a printed text?
Yeah, absolutely. I also, I have said many times in my life that letterpress printing is how I slow the world down enough to be able to like fully develop my ideas about things, to be able to fully develop my like opinions and politics. And a lot of the work that I do is like left printmaking, is like very political, like anti-racist work, anti-capitalist work. And I, I was actually in 2012 when I took my very first letterpress printing class with David Wolf at Wolf Editions in Portland, Maine, who is an incredible letterpress printer, like just incredibly skilled, does beautiful work. When I did that, I was in this period of my life that I started to call the beautiful precipice. I was like learning a tremendous amount. I had sort of grown up in like liberal nonprofit culture through my like work life, and I hadn't really been exposed to a lot of like radical left ideas, and I hadn't had a lot of experience with like grassroots organizing as a way to move and shift power. And in 2012 was sort of the beginning of me like learning about all of that. And so I was learning about that while I was learning about letterpress. And one of the first big projects that I did as a letterpress printer was right after the acquittal of George Zimmerman in the murder of Trayvon Martin. When that acquittal happened in 2013, I letterpress printed a series of posters that had the Ella Baker quote on them: until the killing of Black men, Black mothers' sons becomes as important to the rest of the country as the killing of a white mother's son. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until this happens. She said that in 1964, and it felt so painfully relevant in that moment. I printed all these posters and went to a protest in Portland that was happening, and just gave them away to people in the crowd. And it was actually my first experience with the like deep power of an intentionally like hand printed word, because in all of the like media coverage for that protest, these posters were front and center. And even though some of the like messaging of the protest like didn't as explicitly address the crisis of white supremacy that I think that murder was born out of. It was still like those posters brought that into that like our collective memory of that event. And it was just like it was a really powerful moment for me as a printmaker and as an organizer to be like, oh, we have the ability to shape public conversation by being really intentional about our words and our like down to the letter, you know?
Mhm.
So anyway, sorry, that was a very long story, but
No, that was amazing. And I have two kind of follow-up thoughts and questions about that.
sure.
I'm thinking about magic specifically in terms of revolutionary work. Like the Haitian Revolution started with a voodoo ceremony, and I feel like I've seen some really, really, really bad takes on the internet that like astrology leads to fascism, and I don't think that at all. And I would love to hear kind of I've been rebutting this for a while, so I would love to hear another voice about how I love the printing press and the pamphlet. And this is the other part that I'll get to hopefully in a minute about pamphlets, but how the magical aspect specifically is revolutionary to you, and how those kind of worlds overlap in your practice and your business, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I think that each of us has a responsibility with however we are positioned to fight for collective liberation. That is like a very deeply held belief of mine, and of a lot of people's, I think. And I think that, you know, I don't know, I think people like Chani Nicholas are doing like a really good job of explicitly pulling together those threads and saying like, hey, when we pay attention to astrology, when we pay attention to like the seasons and the ways that our bodies and minds respond to the natural world and the forces around us, we have the ability to change our conditions and change conditions for other people. And we have not only the ability to do that, but a responsibility to do that. And I think, I think that there is like really damaging and unfortunate tradition in a lot of like white women witchy circles, and I say like white cis women witchy circles specifically, that has historically been about like cultural appropriation and like about the just like one more way of like colonizing other traditions and colonizing other people's spirituality and the spirituality of like so many um communities of color like globally.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Oh, I was definitely affirming that I think that's very true as well. Yeah.
So yeah.
The yeah.
So I think that like
I think that
sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, please.
And I think that dovetails into the thing we were talking a little bit about before this all started, of the QAnon infiltration of New Age communities. And for me, I think that does kind of come from this like very British, like Alexandrian tradition in some levels, the Gen Trad of like my great great grandmother, and the oft and very incorrect and oft stated that goddess religions are more peaceful than other religions. And I'm like, have you heard of Kali? Like, hold up. But also the use of deities and stuff. So I would love to hear more about what we were kind of batting around with this infiltration of white women that were, you know, doing the appropriation of other native cultures and other, I'll just let you continue.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think that is like a history and an ongoing practice that we need to grapple with. And like as a cis white woman, like I feel that that is like, because of my positionality, my responsibility to not only not do those things, but to like identify when they are being done in my vicinity and work to like dismantle the structures that allow that to continue, including like having very uncomfortable conversations with people about some of their practices, and you know, like continuing to try to cultivate space, like not like in a way that is about call outs, but in a way that is about like, I believe in your humanity enough, and I believe in your capacity for change enough to bring a hard conversation to you and to have it directly. I think that we could all benefit from a lot more of that. And that, I think, as an abolitionist, is something that is also really important to me, that we don't throw people away. And that means like we take responsibility for having conversations that are uncomfortable with folks who are in our orbit, who we might be better positioned to be able to like handle their nonsense than like a lot of other people, and like have the sort of privilege and responsibility of like having those conversations. You know, I have done a lot over the years to try to be really thoughtful about my magical practice. Like I don't use white sage anymore. I have like learned a lot more in the process of not using it, about like sort of kitchen witchy, like smoke cleansing with herbs that you like have in your cabinet, probably for cooking. Like I just brought a little rosemary tree home from Trader Joe's the other day, and I was like, I like want this in my house forever because it smells so good and it is like clearly about protection.
Mm-hmm. And I think that also is the local being so important in terms of seasons and nature and preservation, because it is the endangered nature of white sage that's the trouble here. It's not that it's just any old plant. We need to find, and you know, and this is also the big business Llewellyn side of the New Age world, where they will like market as many pentacle things as you possibly can get. And I love pentacles. Like I have a pentacle tattoo. Like I am about it. But it's becomes more and more expensive to get like your very, very pretty things that are, you know, witchy, but you can still have powerful objects like your wooden spoon, you know, like that's all you need. Or
Yeah,
little,
exactly.
and I even say this a lot about tarot when you use the images of tarot as like the four corners. If you know, or you don't have to have props if you have like a picture of a sword. I have a sword, but if unlike me, you don't have a sword and you want to have like a theme or sword on your altar, you can just have the cards in front of you and you can invest in like one deck instead of every expensive chalice made by, you know, Raven Silver Wolf or whatever this year. So I think that's the way you approach conversations, at least in the artistic space, and the slowing down, I think, is what differentiates this like knee-jerk reaction of kind of call-out culture versus taking the time to like, whether it be like slowly print something or break down like what is structural racism, how is it a systemic problem, rather than being like that one thing you said is wrong. No, that one thing is produced by all of these systems that have caused you to think that way, and now we have to like slow that down and break it up into parts that we can munch on, and that's how you change. I think for you and other artists too, that's a way to change minds.
Yeah, for sure. And I, letterpress printing for me feels like the antidote to Instagram. I have met and developed, obviously, like relationships and friendships with people through Instagram in ways that I would like never have connected with folks other than through that platform. And like, that is a beautiful and special thing. And the way that that app is so fundamentally about capitalism and so fundamentally about like creating money, and in some ways like sowing like discord in order to like generate more. I was reading on Instagram the other day this person who was like, writing about call out culture, and made the point that like every time there's a pile-on, that's like a whole bunch more engagement in this app. And so like there's a way that it begets itself, like that there's like probably a more articulate way of saying that, but just like it actually hadn't occurred to me that like more comments, more likes, more people like sharing posts and all that, like so that more people can be served more ads, and is the whole idea. And so some of these things, these like behaviors just run rampant. I just read We Will Not Cancel Us by Adrienne Marie Brown, which came out earlier in the pandemic as an essay, and she has reworked pretty significantly and re-released as a book that just came out a couple weeks ago. I really highly recommend it. It's a very powerful, very sort of slowed down, intentional, thoughtful reflection on the ways that call out culture is like not abolitionist, because it doesn't believe that people have the capacity for transformation, and that it is like fundamentally damaging to our movements. And that it was like incredibly comforting to read it and to be like, okay, like this thing that I am seeing be perpetuated. This is someone who is like deeply in movement and is like providing us a third road, like another way of being that is not this or that, that is not like either calling people out or staying silent. Like there is a road that we are building in the middle of those things.
It's like that Ursula Le Guin quote about, we're not able to imagine a world beyond kings, and we can imagine a world not only beyond capitalism but beyond call out culture. And that I think that's so much emotional and psychological work, and I'm very impressed that you're willing to take that on, because the POC that I know are so tired, and so don't need like unpaid education, to be asked for unpaid education, and those of us with more privilege stepping in. And your case, a very beautiful way. I think that aesthetics and beauty are often really overlooked in these kind of righteous anger conversations. I just finished the collected works of June Jordan and all of her poems. And like you were saying, back in the day, or like in the 70s, she's talking about like, I think I'm going to misquote this, but it was this beautiful line about how if every time we killed a Black little boy, if we killed a cop, would somebody start to care, or would anything change? Yep. And it's not that she's, that sounds really combative in a lot of ways, but it's also lyrical. It's also like she does so much for folks who may not know who June Jordan is. She founded Poetry for the People in Berkeley. She taught at UC Berkeley for a long time, part of the womanist movement instead of the feminist movement. Loved by, Adrienne Rich and everybody. Alice Walker and her would write poems to each other, which I really love. But yeah, this idea of these are hard truths. And like Sean is even saying to me that I do this kind of like emotional damage to myself, that I'm constantly reading like the poems by Black women about like Black sons dying. It's like I'll read a Patricia Smith and I'll read a Tracy K. Smith and then I'll read June Jordan. And I think it's such important work because this is not some screed of someone just reacting to something on the internet, on Twitter or something like that. This is actually like thoughtful art about imagining yourself in the place of these women, or, Patricia Smith, it's her son, her own Black son, that she has to be concerned about. And that hearing from these mothers and these people is just in artistic ways. And I think that that's what I really appreciate about your work, is that you're doing the hard questions, the hard conversations, but you're doing them beautifully. And I really appreciate that.
Well, certainly not all the time, but thank you for that. And also, June Jordan is my favorite poet, hands down. And she also said at one point, I do not see a necessary conflict between the sonnet and the bow and arrow.
So good.
Which is one that I letterpress printed, actually. When I got my first, I have a tiny tabletop press that now lives at the community print shop that I work at, or make my work at. That was one of the first things that I printed on that tiny tabletop. I had a little setup for a short time in an apartment of mine. My partner built me some drawers for my first type acquisition that I got from my first teacher. And I set that June Jordan quote because it is like sort of how I orient my life.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. Being a sonneteer, and so many sonnets at this point that I have to like intentionally sit down when I write a poem and say it won't be 14 lines. It won't be 14 lines. Yeah, we're coming up on like an hour and 15. I know I could keep you here all night, but I wanted to take your attention to the time and be respectful of, I'm sure you have a life. But Kim says, looking forward to your book of sigils if you ever do one. Thank you for your thoughtful answers. He has also said thank you for your answers. I know Sean has said thank you very much for all of their questions. Closing. I hear like that I've lagged out. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yep. You're back.
Okay. I was just wondering if you had any closing thoughts, anything I didn't ask that you would like to chat about a little bit in relation to tarot or magic or liberation and social justice.
Gosh, I could talk to y'all all night. Such good question askers. And I just really appreciate the way that you made a very comfortable space for me. I am not always the best at talking about my own work. It is a thing that I'm still kind of getting used to. It's like I used to, I was a youth worker for a long time and did like facilitated a lot of workshops and trainings and stuff. So I'm used to talking in front of people, but I'm not used
to. You're a fabulous speaker. It's wonderful.
Sorry,
I said you're. Oh, I said you're a fabulous speaker. It totally shows.
Thank you. Yeah.
And,
it's just vulnerable in a different way to do it about your own stuff. So thank you for making the space for that. I appreciate it a lot.
You are super welcome. I try to create little magical circles.
You're good at
it. And thank you. Kim would like to know, what is the best way to follow your work and current projects? Is it Instagram, or do you have other places you like to be on?
Instagram is it for me, pretty much. And then I have a mailing list for my printmaking work, which includes my like witchy work too. I have tried to make an intentional integration of all of those things in the last couple of years, and I'm really grateful to be able to do that. So my website is radicalemprints.com, and you can sign up for my mailing list there. I also often give I'll give discount codes for my shop, and like little bits of just thinking about things in infrequent newsletters. And then my screen name on Instagram is radicalemprints. And that is where a lot of, I try to send out to my mailing list new work first, but don't always do that. Sometimes it goes on Instagram first. So either of those things or both of those things is a good way to stay in touch about what I'm up to.
Cool. This is good motivation to get you back on Instagram, Kim, since I followed you forever ago and you haven't followed me back. Kim is an aspiring tattoo artist. And I would love to see more of Kim's work appear on Instagram, because I would love to see drawings, in the quarantine world. Hi, Kim. Dee says, thank you so much for building this magical circle energy with us that we were talking about earlier. Yeah, this has been a beautiful night, a beautiful Tuesday tarot. I'm really appreciative that this came together and worked out. I think you've been so generous and responsive on social media, on here with all of the questions. I think you mentioned your bags. I had bought your tarot deck and you sent me a free bag later on, and I was like, let me give you money. And you're always doing giveaways with your art too, as anyone who follows you on Instagram can tell. I wish you absolutely all the best. I hope that you keep in touch and that we see more of maybe an art book, a book of sigils. We would absolutely love to see more from you. And thank you once again for being here tonight.
Awesome. It was my total pleasure. So thank you so much for inviting me to do this.
Cool. Thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the call. And yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. And I will hopefully have this uploaded to YouTube for the folks that couldn't make it today. I know there's another member of the DKIM polycule that had to work until later tonight, and really yeah, thank you so much. Have a lovely night, everybody. Okay.
Yay. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, folks.
No.